Okay, I hope everybody can hear me. I just wanted to welcome everybody. I'm Commissioner Tom Peterson, and I just wanted to welcome everybody to our webinar today entitled Being There, Supporting Fruit Producers in Hard Times. You just think about what is a hard time, and and it seems like in agriculture, we always have this. And right now I can just tell you that we have really challenging pork prices, dairy prices. We've had a lot of issues lately with dairy. And here comes the drought for anybody that hadn't seen the drought monitor this morning, and interest and everything else. And so as we talk to different folks, we thought this is a good idea, because I think one thing at the Department of Agriculture is that we do have good resources in our state, and we want people to use them. Mental health is an incredibly important facet for agriculture. And the fact that we have things like farm advocates and helpline is extremely important. The last thing I just say before I turn it over is on these things, when you encounter a farmer, the one thing that I've learned in my years of working in this is to ask twice, maybe 3 times, because the farmers will call me and tell me what's going on, and I'll tell them, here's a resource, give them a call. And sometimes it takes a couple of times, but it's worth it, because we've known too many farmers that this has been a very tough struggle for. So with that, we're really glad that you joined us today. And we have our great ag mental health specialists, and Monica McConkey and Ted Matthews. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ted. So Ted, take it away. And thanks for joining us today.
Hi. Thank you, Tom. First of all, what I'd like to talk about is the farmers and kind of what their mindsets are. And the big thing to begin with is their fear of the unknown. What is going to happen? And not only do they fear what's going to happen, but they're also looking at what will happen if I'm not who I am, which is a farmer and farm family and so on. So their fear is that they're going to end their way of life. And that is a huge, huge factor for how they look at all of those things. When that happens, fear and anxiety and frustration sets in, and their ability to cope with that and work with family and work through that becomes diminished, because they have a focus on what they want, and sometimes what they want they're not able to get. And so then they have to learn how to take care of themselves by doing what they can, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The big question oftentimes they ask is why? Why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to the industry? Why is this happening to my family? And if you ask yourself that question 100 times and you don't have an answer, the chances are the 101st time you're not going to have one either. So the focus then becomes on what can you do, and we'll talk about that a little later. People tend to pull back, and when they might need to step forward, they're pulling back and they don't talk about what's going on. And one of the reasons they don't is because they assume they can handle things. I can still handle this, and it's because they look at mental health as mental illness. And when you look at mental health as mental illness, you're literally saying, until I get to this breaking point, I'm not going to look at that. And one of the things that we can all do is help them focus on better is better. Feeling better about something beats the heck out of not feeling better about something. Dealing with it is better. And so we have to focus on being a part of that process for them, and having them understand that reaching out early will have much better results than waiting until you can't handle anything and you can't deal with any of those things. So if they start pulling back and they start showing anger, then what we need to do is deal with those kinds of things. And remember, anger by itself doesn't exist. So if you're dealing with a farmer and a farmer's anger, you're actually dealing with a soft emotion, which would be jealousy or hurt or frustration. And so they need to deal with the emotions that they're feeling and not the ones that they're showing, which is oftentimes anger. So I always tell people the same thing too about anger, drop your IQ 50 points. None of us are that smart. So when you're focused on those things, when you're looking at how you can deal with that, you need to say to yourself, what can I do? And when we get into that, we'll focus on that. But remember that there's a lot of people that are out there to help, which is your clergy, your farm business management people, your extension, the colleges. There are a lot of people that are out there to help, but they need to know who those people are and how they can get a hold of them and to be very accessible to them. Because if they don't know that the program exists, how are they going to find that out? So we, as people who work with them, all of us need to reach out and say, these are the things that you have available to you. Extension is a good group. Farm business management is a good group. So are the farm advocates and the farm mediators. They do great jobs. And if we use them, things will be better. So I don't know how much time I have left. So focusing on that and focusing on what fixates you about the why. Constantly we hear, why is this happening? And I don't have an answer to that. So what we need to do is turn the tables on that and say, what can I look at? How can I look at those things? And so when we get to that, I want to make sure that becomes the focus. People are counting on you as the farmer, and people are counting on the family members to learn what they can do and how they can do it. Because mental health is not a way of waiting, it's a way of stepping forward. So when you need to call someone, do it. And if you feel the family member needs to get help, one of the best ways that I can think of is to say to them, let's call Ted, let's call Monica. They know more about this than I do, and go from there. Don't assume that they're just going to say, okay, well, let's call this person. Help them with that by saying those things. Say, what can we do? How do we get there? What are we going to accomplish with that? And by making it simple and by not making it sound like they have these major mental health issues, it will be helpful in having them move forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Monica.
All right, thanks so much, Ted. I'm gonna see if we can you get the slides into slideshow mode, Meg? I was trying, but I can't do it from my screen. Just so we're seeing the big screen instead of.
On it.
Okay, perfect.
Yep,
Well, I'm
yep.
going to jump in. So I'm Monica McConkey. I am one of the 2 ag mental health specialists in the state and legislatively funded, thanks to our legislature. And I cover kind of the upper 2/3, I guess, of the state, kind of St. Cloudish on up. And Ted covers the southern part of the state, although I know we work with people in both, all areas of the state. So I thought I would start and jump in just by reviewing for all of us some of the warning signs that we can be on alert for when we're working with folks who we're worried about, who we might be sensing that something's going on. that we might feel like, things just aren't right. So we'll get to a list, but mainly what I want to highlight in this piece is that if someone is different than how they used to be, so if you're noticing changes from their what we would call baseline functioning, so maybe this person has always kind of been upbeat, or maybe this person has always shown up every morning at Cenex with the guys. Maybe this person has kept their appearance a certain way for years, and all of a sudden you're noticing changes in them. That's a time to really perk up and pay attention. So sometimes the changes that we see in people that are struggling emotionally, mentally, and potentially could be suicidal are things like are listed on this screen. Isolation being a big one. When people are struggling, often they isolate, they cut off contact with people, they're not answering calls, you're not seeing them in church. They very much have walled themselves off from people. That is a warning sign for sure. Mood changes are a warning sign. When you see or hear farmers talking about really abrupt decisions in sales of land or livestock or equipment, that could be a warning sign that they're potentially thinking about suicide or struggling. And sometimes in difficult ag economies like we're experiencing right now, there may be a cause to abruptly sell. But if it seems like it's really coming out of nowhere with no forethought, something to really check into and check in with them on. If you're noticing the farm site or fence lines or animals or equipment kind of falling into disrepair, that's also a time to check in if that's not how the farmer or the farm family previously functioned. So those are a few. You can read the others. If you hear people talking about I'm not sleeping at all at night, if they are sharing or if you're seeing increased drug or alcohol use as a means to cope, they are just not getting their work done. So we'll see this with maybe dairy farmers just missing milkings. A lot of crop farmers are spraying right now. And if you just notice that things just are not getting done, and that's a change for them, really time to check in. And so the follow-up question then is, okay, I notice these things, what do I do? And what you can do is just share with the person what you're noticing. So, I'm kind of concerned. I've noticed that this is happening, or I've noticed I'm not seeing you places anymore. I noticed you seem upset. That's a very straightforward way, and it may not have anything to do with suicide, but you've at least asked the question and opened up the conversation. I also encourage you all, for those of you who have taken QPR, question, persuade, refer, or you have taken Safe Talk training, go back and look through those materials again, refresh yourself with the cards you got with the steps and the resources, just so it's top of mind. So if you do encounter someone that you are struggling with, or they're indicating that they're having thoughts of suicide, that you have those resources right in front of you in the moment. If you haven't taken a QPR or Safe Talk training, by all means, find one and take it, and it will increase your comfort level in working with folks who might be suicidal. Farmers and ranchers, we know that when they are stressed and they isolate, there are a chosen few people that can infiltrate that isolation, and that is you folks. That are those people are the nutritionists, the agronomists, the crop consultants, the milk truck drivers, the veterinarians. People related to the business will get to the farmers much quicker than myself or Ted as counselors would. So we really want to arm you with those tools to recognize warning signs and to be able to ask that question and get them to the help they need. So again, I think a question just came up about what were the names of the trainings. And one is a 1-hour super simple QPR, question, persuade, refer. The other is Safe Talk, which is a more in-depth 4-hour training. I'm a trainer for both. I know Emily Kreckelberg in Extension is a trainer for both. So if you are interested in hosting a training, by all means, get in touch with us to do that. So with that, I will send it back over to Ted.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Monica. When we talk about what can we do, I think the very first thing we need to look at is what happens when people don't know what to do. Because when people don't know what to do, they do nothing. And we need to know what we can do to help something go forward. Call a clergy, call a therapist, call someone, law enforcement. They're all really important factors in doing something when we see bad things happening. So one of the things that we need to also really focus on is our own energy levels. If we use all our energy up to look at all the things that we can't do anything about and how we won't be able to do anything, then that's exactly what happens. We do nothing. We use up all our energy with things that we have no power over, and we have no energy left to focus on the things that we can do something about. Family is a huge issue and a huge factor. And oftentimes with the farmer, they're feeling far too much responsibility for everything that's going on with them. So they need to work and share that with the other family members so they can do something in front of them. They can work together to become a healthier unit and deal with this together, because together they will find far better solutions, and that support will help them get through the day from day one to day two. One of the things that I always see with dairy farmers, if oftentimes they're going to lose their farm, one of their big fears is, these are family members, and these cows are family members. I know them by name. I brought them up from birth, and losing them is losing a part of the family. And so knowing that and focusing on what I can do with that and how I can express that becomes really important. The more we don't talk about those things, the more we pull back, and the more we pull back, the worse things get. So getting people to open up, getting people to talk about what's going on, getting people to see what they need to see in order to go from point A to point B becomes really, really important. I work with sheriff's departments oftentimes, and what I do is, let's face it, most of us work regular hours, and oftentimes when crisis happens, we're not available. So who is available? Sheriff's departments, and they're well trained, and they go out right away, so they can take care of situations immediately where most people can't. So use the resources that you have, like sheriff's departments. Get to know them, have them get to know you, and understand what you can do with them and how you can make that situation better. There's a lack of trust oftentimes from one agency to another. In my opinion, there aren't anywhere near enough of us doing the things that we do. So we should be really helping each other with all of the different goals that we have to focus on what I can do, how I can make my life better and their life better. Remember also that taking care of yourself becomes the priority. Because if you can take care of yourself, then you have the ability to take care of other people. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be very good at taking care of other people. So focus on taking care of yourself, how you can do that, and communicating with the people that are really important to you. Oftentimes, the kids tend to be sort of left out of all those things. For one, they don't want to hear all the bad things that are happening and so on, so they're not talked to. Talking to them helps them get to a point where they can help and they can understand that you're going forward, and they feel like a lot less isolated. My guess is they would feel a whole lot worse and be a whole lot more concerned if you don't talk to them and don't tell them what's going on. So with that, I will move on to the next section, which is with Monica. So take it away, Monica.
Great. Thanks for that, Ted. So I'm going to spend just right around the next 10 minutes talking about what happens to someone when they are under stress, because I think if we, not only for ourselves, but the farmers we work with, if we can understand what is going on with them when they're having that stress experience, we're better able to identify it and then change our response to them to help them deal with that stress. Wondering if the slides will be coming up, because I didn't print my slides, so we're
Here they come. Monica.
okay, perfect. we are good at going with the flow. So if we can flip ahead to, I think, the third slide. And one more. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to talk through what happens to an individual when they are encountering a stressful incident. And this is us, just like our farmers we work with, right? Any human being. So when a stressful incident happens, a whole host of things immediately goes into effect. And just to note, the stressful incident doesn't have to be actually something that's happening in the moment. It can be something we're worried about happening in the future. So if we are worried about how we're going to continue dairying, if we're worried about the cows having to go down the road, if we're worried about how we're going to pay our bills, even if it's not here right now in the moment, we're still having this stress response related to that. And so when a stressful incident happens, information is sent to this little almond-shaped part of our brain called the amygdala. And from there, after that does some instantaneous processing and interpreting, it goes to our hypothalamus and then out to our body. And things happen immediately. Our adrenaline surges, our heart beats faster, our pulse rate and blood pressure go up. We start breathing rapidly and also shallowly. Our senses really sharpen, and we release glucose and fats to supply energy to our body so that we can fight or flee. It's that fight or flight response. Now, in terms of danger, like a bull running across the yard at us, this process saves our life, right? Because we don't have to think, our body just acts and we fight or flight. However, with most of our day-to-day stressors, or the stressors that our producers are feeling right now, this process happens, but is not helpful to them, because nowhere in that list of bullet point items does it include thinking. A stress response does not include stopping and thinking. And when our amygdala is firing, when those stressors are firing, it actually shuts down the part of our brain that thinks. And so a lot of things can really spiral downward when that happens. We become very emotional. We focus on the stress like Ted was talking about. We do not focus on, okay, what can I do and what is my plan? We are living in a world of emotion. So next slide. If you think of it like a teeter-totter, when our emotions are elevated, so when that stress response is kicking off and our emotions are elevated, our ability to be rational, to think, to problem solve, greatly diminished. So we might be talking to producers about options or about strategies or things they can try or things they can do, and it seems like we are just not being heard. And that is because of this stress response, that they are often chronically stressed people, have lived in stress for years. And so that emotional side is elevated and their ability to think or plan or problem solve greatly diminished. So the goal is to get to a place where we are calm and rational, and we're helping them get to that place of being calm and rational. And there are many ways that that can happen just in the moment. If you're working with someone and they seem really elevated, really emotional, really intense, you know, you can say things, you know, let's just take a few deep breaths here. Let's just sit down. Let's try to think through this. Pausing, going for a little walk, going to get a drink of water for them, things that just bring about calm. And then the other thing that's helpful, as Ted was talking about, help them focus on what they can do. And sometimes what helps that teeter-totter level out are just saying the words, okay, let's make a plan. And when we say, let's make a plan, that helps that switch in our brains flip from emotion to thinking. And then proceed to help them do, and write it down if possible, in whatever capacity you're working with them in, just start making a step-by-step plan with them. Like, number one, what do you control in all of this? We can't control the weather, we can't control the prices. What are some things you do control in all of this? Start there. You can also start with, who are some people you can call to help? Or what are some things you can do to relax? So just very calm approach and working within the realm of what they can control and what they can do. Okay, and that leads us into the next slide. So when you do find yourself working with these folks, you can go ahead and skip to the next slide as well. We can assume they're chronically stressed, right? They've had these things on their minds all the time. So there are some things that you can do that can be helpful. Number one, just listen. I talk to a lot of egg business folks, and they tell me their trip to the farm, 75% of it is hearing the worries and the stress and the anxiety, and maybe that last little bit is actually getting down to business, right? Because that is where that person is in the moment. So just actively listen, let them know you're listening. It's not a time to try to solve their problems. Just be attentive, nod your head, repeat back or summarize back what you're hearing, clarify, so that they know you're a listening ear. Another thing that helps is be very clear and concise with what you need from them. So let's say you're a veterinarian and you need them to follow some protocol, or you're a farm business manager and you need a certain amount of information from them. When their brain is taxed with stress, think bullet point, not narrative. So be very clear and concise with what you need from them or what you need them to remember. And write it down if at all possible so that they have that visual. Because when they leave their time meeting with you, all of life is going to flood back in for them, and they're not going to remember all of the things. So listen, actively listen, be clear and concise with your message, cut out a lot of extra words that they're just not going to be able to take in at the moment. Write down what the plan is or what you need from them. Check in. So because of the amount of stress and anxiety and worry and strain, plus just the work that has to be done, they're often going to forget what needs to be done. They're going to miss deadlines. They're not going to get you things by a due date, if you will. So be checking in with them routinely to see how they're doing, to see how the plan is progressing, to see if they need any help from you, just depending on what your role is with the farmers. And then providing resources, which I know we're going to cover a number of resources at the end of our time. Really important to have those with you when you are out and about meeting with your farmers or they're coming into your office. I have had people call me because they have gotten the brochure or my card from their crop consultant. And what a relief for that crop consultant to, as they're hearing all the worries and anxieties, to have that resource to hand off. So keep your resources with you when you are meeting with farmers and interacting with them, whether out on the farm or in your office. Okay, we're ready to go on to the next section. And I believe in this section, Ted and I are going to talk for a few minutes on what is called compassion fatigue. And I can kick us off, Ted, if you're good with that. I guess we didn't really talk about who was going to go first, so I can just keep going. When we talk compassion fatigue, that is a term that's used to describe what people helping either other people or animals in distress, what they experience or what they can experience. So when you are a person who regular part of your day is interacting with people who are distressed, who are worried, who are dealing with a lot of anxiety, or if you're one of the folks on the call who also work with animals in distress, same applies. We begin to take on their distress onto our shoulders. And we start to notice the impact of that just in our ability to function. And it may look like, I just can't do this anymore. It may look like you've lost empathy and you feel like you just don't care anymore. There's a long list of symptoms, I guess you could call them, of experiencing compassion fatigue. But there are also ways to heal from that experience or to prevent it, which would be the hope, right? So if you're working with people who day in and day out are in really difficult situations, they are sharing those situations with you. Some of it may be traumatic. It may be very heart-wrenching. You need to have ways to protect yourself from taking that on and taking that home with you, losing sleep over it, and having it impact your work and your life. And some of those things really are about balance, making sure you have things in life that feed your soul outside of your work. And how do you intentionally connect with those things? What coping strategies do you use to deal with stressors that you experience day in and day out? So lots of self-care, lots of surrounding yourself with people that are good for you, that are supportive of you, really watching your thinking, And just like we're talking about with helping our producers do, make sure your thoughts are focused on what you can control, what is outside of your control. And it's also really tapping into what I like to call your spiritual protective factor. Like, what feeds your soul? What do you believe in outside of yourself? What gives you hope for the future? Very important when we are working with difficult situations and folks in chronic stress, that we really hold on to those things and make it an intentional part of our day. And I would say the foundation to all of that, and then I'll turn it over to Ted, the foundation to all of that is taking care of ourselves physically. What we know, when we get stressed, a lot of times that goes out the door. And so are you hydrating with water, preferably not coffee, energy drinks, pop, or beer? So water, milk, good healthy things, hydrate, eat healthy, move your body, get exercise, and sleep. And sleep is probably the biggest of all of those. So keep that in mind as well as you're caring for and showing concern to the people that you serve. Make sure that you are on the top of that list. Okay, Ted, I'll turn it over to you.
Good points, Monica. Also, we need to always focus on having empathy and not sympathy. We need to understand what people are feeling and what they're going through, but at the same time, if we have sympathy, it can interfere with everything that we do. And what I like to explain to people that are working with farmers or families, they have people that feel sympathy for them, that what they've gone through, and that's really an important factor, and they need to have that. However, empathy is what we need to show them, because sympathy is something that other people have that we don't have the capacity to do. And why that's so important is if I'm feeling what all of the people that I'm working with are feeling, I won't be able to survive. I need to hear and understand what they're feeling and go through that process. But sympathy is for other people, and that's a very important factor, but it is not something that we can show, because if we do, we will burn out really fast. So taking care of ourselves means focus on what we see, what we hear, how we can go forward, and doing those things is crucial for any of us that are helpers. Also understanding that there are people that are better at certain things than we are. I refer people to extension. I refer people to all different kinds of organizations that would help them more than I would be able to. I tell people I wouldn't trust me with a dime. Don't focus on financial things when I am not any good at that. Focus on what your end is and how you can do that. And as Monica had pointed out earlier, send people to other places when they're the experts at that. If I see a farm that needs to go into transition, there are really good people in the state of Minnesota. We have some great advocates, and we need to use those, and we need to focus on how they can go forward. And then we work together with them. I've oftentimes been in the same room with farm advocates and farm mediators, because we do our end, and that is really, really helpful. There's a lot of great resources in the state of Minnesota, and the more we use them, the better off we are, and the less chance we have of burning out. It's so focused on all of the negative things and all of the bad things that are going on, that if we don't focus on how we take care of ourselves, then we will not succeed. And we'll also be bad at what we do. And if we're bad at what we do, then we feel all of those stresses too. So taking care of ourselves becomes really, really important. And that goes for all of us in this industry.
Thanks, Ted. And I think now it's time to talk about some of those services and resources that you and Monica referred to. And Stephen, if you could put the slides back up, we'll take a little tour. We who planned this webinar really felt it was important for you to know about the services and resources that are out there and available to help you in your desire to be supportive to the producers that you work with and that you care about. All of these resources are available to you on our website, and that will be up in just a moment. And also are available in printed form. We have printed materials that you can get from us at no charge. If there are things that you would like to distribute, you would like to have in the glove box of your truck, you would like to put out in the lobby of your bank. Stephen has a question.
Yeah,
Yes,
unfortunately,
Stephen.
I'm not able to, Meg, unfortunately, I'm not able to share my PowerPoint at this time.
Okay, well then I will go back
Do you
to,
have that?
I will go back to this. And I will share from here. Hang on just a second. I don't know why this has been challenging. We're going to see if we can get this to be full screen. I don't think I can. So I'm just, rather than waste your time, I want to move forward. Here are the websites that I talked about, that they go to the same place, depending on how much you want to type. MinnesotaFarmStress.com or MNFarmStress.com. And they're all summarized in a little brochure, which is one of the items that we're happy to send out for you. You have met Ted and Monica today, and I just want to reiterate that they are available to meet one-on-one with farmers and farm families at no charge. Their service is funded by the legislature and has for the last close to 20 years, maybe more. And so I really encourage you to stress to the people you work with that these are people who know and understand farming and agriculture, because that makes a tremendous difference. If you think you're going to talk to a counselor or a therapist who gets it versus somebody who's not even going to understand where you're coming from and doesn't know about farming, it makes a huge difference. So please don't hesitate to take this information and refer. They welcome those calls. We have a 24/7 confidential helpline in Minnesota that also responds by text. That is answered in Minnesota by a qualified crisis center. And that's available for people who need to unburden themselves, people who are in immediate crisis. They have suicide counseling expertise. They answer 988 calls as well as our phone line. And they're also able to refer people. Not everybody needs the same thing. So if somebody is calling in and they don't need emotional support, they need business planning support, or they need a cash flow, they could refer them to our farm advocates, who I'll talk about in the moment, or they could refer them to the MDA Rural Finance Authority if they're wanting to know about loan programs. So they're really a very good hub. One important thing that they do is they do warm transfers to Ted and Monica. So if they have a producer who really is in distress and needs some deep counseling and needs to begin making a plan right now, they know that they can transfer to Ted and Monica. So that is available 24 hours a day. Ted mentioned farm advocates. This is another program that's a legacy from the 1980s farm crisis, and we're just thrilled that we've had it in place since 1984. It is a network of farm advisors, many of whom are retired farmers, many of whom are retired farm business management instructors. And their job is really to be in the farmer's corner as he, she, or they navigate a difficult financial situation or a natural disaster, the aftermath of a natural disaster. So you can see on the slide some of the things that they have skills in. It is important to know that they are not a neutral party. They are there for the farmer. And in 2022, they spent over 6,000, the 10 of them spent over 6,000 hours counseling clients. This is another free and confidential service, and people can connect with it very easily if they just call the Minnesota Farm and Rural Helpline number, which is up there on the screen. They work hand in hand with the Minnesota Farmer Lender Mediation Program. We know that farm finances are a major source of stress and crisis sometimes for our producers. This program is run by Extension. It's a tremendously organized and helpful program. These are trained and neutral facilitators, and they are there to help resolve disputes. In Minnesota, we have a mandatory mediation law so that if a producer owes more than $15,000, the creditor is obligated to offer mediation service before doing any kind of foreclosure, bankruptcy, repossession. And so the farmers offer the opportunity to have this free and confidential mediation. They can also help when USDA program participation gets thorny with farm succession and transition issues and some other things that happen in the neighborhood. But I really encourage you to help producers learn about this program. And then when crisis really is a crisis, we have throughout the state of Minnesota mobile crisis teams. And unfortunately, these are a well-kept secret, but they are teams of trained mental health professionals that can show up on site in very little time and immediately help people do kind of what Monica talked about. If you need help getting somebody to return to their base level of functioning and engage with the rational part of their brain, begin to make a plan for next steps in the situation that perhaps it is a suicide attempt, concern about a suicide, doesn't have to be, but could be, they have the skills to do this and they can show up. And they will. You can find the one for your county or the counties that you serve or are most commonly in at this website that DHS runs. And it might be a good idea just to put those in your phone so that you have them and you know how to reach them just in case you need to. And if you're thinking about calling the sheriff, you may be thinking about calling a mobile crisis team. These resources work together. If you go to our farmstress.com page, you can let us know that you would like promotional materials. As I said in the beginning, we're happy to send brochures. We have can koozies. We have little wallet cards that people can pass out, or you could put up on the bulletin board, clips, and are adding things all the time. And some are going into Spanish, Somali, and Hmong language as well. So we'll have those. So we just wanted to make sure that you knew that those resources are available, encourage you to use them as your partners and allies as you are working with producers who may be struggling. That is the end of our slideshow, and we would like to use the last 12 or so minutes for answering questions that you have, questions that have come up. My colleague Cami Schoenfeld has been watching the Q&A in the chat, and I have seen some other questions. And so at this point, if you have questions for Ted and Monica, or you have a point of clarification, please, we'd like to answer those now. Cami, do we have any? Can you come off mute? Maybe I have to invite you to come off mute.
Nothing. The one question was if other states have resources, and I believe it varies from state to state, but you can probably answer that better than me.
I see a question here from Bill. If a producer lives outside of Minnesota, who can they contact? The Extension Services and the State Departments of Agriculture are all working on dedicated farm stress programs. So if you contact either of those entities, they will direct you to what is available in their state. In our state, the model, for example, is Ted and Monica. You just call and have services. And if you are in another state like Wisconsin or I believe South Dakota, there's a voucher system so that you can seek mental health. It's not going to cost you, but their system's just a little bit different than ours. I saw something else just pop up, Cami. Did you see that one? Question about where to get materials. Where to get the printed materials that we referenced. I'm going to put our website in and you can visit that, and we will have an order form there. And I'm also going to put my my email in so that you can email me directly and ask about that. But in the meantime, a question that I have here is, could you guys talk about, you guys meaning Ted and Monica, talk about the toll that stress takes on relationships, like marriages, other farm relationships, and There may be a situation that's stressful, but seeing how the individuals are interacting with each other, that may be another source of stress that is a little unsettling to people who want to help.
Well, I think we are doing more and more and more and more marriage counseling, and that's because the stresses on the farm are getting. There was a time when most of the stress on the farm was the farmer, and he focused on whatever he needed to do. Now, the wives are truly involved in the farm and in the farm life, so that communication breaks down oftentimes, and we are doing more and more marriage counseling because of that. It's difficult for farmers to talk about what they're feeling, and it's also difficult for wives when they go off the farm to have a totally different life and then come back to the farm life, and how to balance that. Meg, you know that better than anyone. And it's really hard for them, and finding ways to work together when they didn't learn how to work together in the past, because their dads, their grandfathers, everybody had their role, and that's what they followed. Now it's truly blended, and let's face it, on most regular farms, man or a woman can do the work, because what weighs more than 50 pounds on the farm anymore, except dairy and so on. So that has created a lot more things, and women now do the books. And if women do the books, they have an opinion, and that opinion might not be a popular one. And how you work through those things becomes a whole lot more difficult. What do you think, Monica?
Yeah, I'll echo that. Most of the calls I get, the initiating reason for the call is around relationships, when there's so much stress underlying that. And I think of it like, and I just saw a question come into the chat about kids, and kids on the farm and how they are impacted. And when you think about a balloon, and let's say stress is that, like squeezing the balloon doesn't get smaller, just kind of pops up through your fingers, right? And we'll see that the stress on the farm comes out in relationship issues. It comes out in kids experiencing mental health problems, or kids being defiant, all very common. And so it's important to look at, like, what is the root cause here? What is the underlying stressor? And then how does that bubble into the relationships? And how can we help the couples or the family members work through that stress verbally and talk it through and problem solve, versus in a reactionary way when they are very emotional, and things are said and things are done that are just really not helpful.
And with kids.
Oh, go ahead. Keep going with kids, because that was the follow-up question, Ted.
Okay.
So you're on the right track.
With kids, that's also changed a lot, because forever, kids had all the chores that they would need to do and so on, and that becomes less. And a lot of times it's thinking that you're doing them a favor, and the truth is, my belief has always been, kids on the farm need to do chores and need to have responsibilities if they ever expect them to take over the farm at some point. Work ethic does not come from a philosophy, it comes from work. And so if the kids have chores and they have responsibilities, they are going to be much more prepared to take over a farm when they get older.
Great. We have another interesting question here, which is, are you seeing a shift in the issues that are causing mental health challenges for farmers recently, or is it kind of the same that it has ever been? Like what's the impetus or the catalyst?
Well, I think farmers always have had to deal with things that are outside of their control, which often have a huge impact on the success or failure of their operation. And that's hard. It's not like they can slap a price tag on their product and this is what we're going to get for it. You know, they can't dial in the weather they want. And those kinds of things have always been there. I think part of the change is the costs of inputs, the costs of equipment. So there's kind of more at stake than maybe in the past. So more pressure to make it work. The average age of our farmers is right around 60 years old. And so if there's nobody coming to take over the family farm, then what? That's a huge stressor. Even if there is somebody next in line to take over the farm, I think Ted would agree that many of my clients come to me because we're working through farm transition, succession planning stressors, and relationship problems. So yeah, that's a good question, because I think some things are what they have been over the course of time for our egg producers. But I think in today's economy, there's some shifts where there's pressure to be up more on technology. There's, the cost of inputs versus what they're getting paid for what they're producing, makes it really difficult to survive on the farm. Or what are your thoughts, Ted?
Well, and working harder is no longer the solution. Now it's working smarter. And that's a major shift forever. If things got bad, you just put in a couple extra hours a day for X amount of time, and then you could catch up. Now, if you make bad decisions, I don't care how hard you work, you're not going to be farming anymore. So that becomes a huge stressor. Now we're focused on how do we farm smarter, and look at all of the resources that they now have to look at that they didn't in the past. So they have to be really capable of making difficult decisions all the time, and that becomes more important than the X number of hours that they put in.
All right, and something else, Monica, that you mentioned at a conference we were both at earlier this week, and you talked about the importance of farmers needing to come to their own conclusion when it comes to issues such as selling land, selling cows, changing enterprises that you have found. Well, maybe you could just talk a little bit about that. I think you know what I mean, that if you make a suggestion to a farmer that's too close to the bone, you'll be cut out. So could you talk a little bit about?
Yeah, it is tough. And I know many of you on this call have been in these positions where the writing is on the wall, at least in our perception, that, it's not going to work for this farmer to keep dairying, or it's not going to work for whatever the enterprise is. It's not financially feasible, whatever the case is. However, when we put that out there to the farmer as their choice or their option, and they feel passionately and strongly about this is their legacy, this is what they live for, oftentimes that causes such it really can just end the relationship. I know farmers that have gone to other therapists, or they have worked with people in egg industry who have told them, you need to sell the cows. This is not working for you anymore. You need to find a different job. Wouldn't it be best if you just found something with benefits and PTO and set hours, and your family would be in a much better position? We can find ways to help them come to that, but be careful about putting that out there in front of them, because they will feel automatically like you don't understand me, you don't understand my passion, you don't understand the history, the legacy, and it really hurts the working relationship. So it's kind of walking that fine line of helping them realize what's coming, and yet not not putting it out that we know what's best for you, because they're the ones that need to come to that
And the
decision.
consequence of doing that would be they would simply stop working with you, and they would probably make even worse decisions down the road. So you're absolutely right, Monica. And it's hard to do because sometimes, the writing on the wall is pretty clear, but that's not our decision. It's not our farm, and we need to support them, but we also need to inform them of what we see. And so that's definitely a fine line.
Wonderful. And those are going to have to be our last words. We're at 1 o'clock. It is the end of our scheduled time together. I want to thank you panelists. I want to thank everybody who's engaged in this work and concerned about the producer community and others in the agriculture community. I want to share with you that not only do Ted and Monica work directly with producers, but they also do information and outreach, and they do educational presentations. And so if your staff would benefit from interacting with Ted and Monica and exploring some of the themes that we started on today, they are available to do that. Just give them a call. This webinar was recorded, and we are going to send you, everybody who registered for the webinar, a link to the recording. And I saw that some good citizen also was doing a transcript. And so we'll follow up on that to be available. I have one message from Cammie here. Oh, she just said, great job. Okay, well, I think I can let you guys all go. We want to thank you very much on behalf of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, the commissioner, and all the little commissioners and the staff here. We love working with you, and we are all in this together. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of your week.